Welcome back to another episode of Mr. McCune's Minute Science. This is part 3 of covalent bonding, which is the last step in our trilogy of becoming an intro expert on covalent bonding. Now, if back in our classroom I asked you to take a full gulp of dihydrogen monoxide, would you do it? Would you be brave enough to take some dihydrogen monoxide? I don't know. Here's the thing. This molecule, this covalent compound, sounds incredibly intimidating. But when you break it down, it's really just H2O. 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen, and we're going to go through the naming principles for covalent molecules so you can do this with any covalent compound that you see. Let's get into it. I licked the Sharpie. That didn't taste so good. Let's break down naming covalent molecules. First thing we're going to need is a covalent molecule. So we're going to need a compound, something like C2H2. And you guys have seen this on your previous covalent bond practice sheet. This is comprised of 2 different elements, carbon and hydrogen, and there happens to be 2 atoms of carbon and 2 atoms of hydrogen. Now let's look at the steps for naming a covalent molecule. Step 1 is we want to write the element name for the first element in the compound. So, carbon, we just write it normally. We don't put any suffix on it, we don't do an IDE, it's just carbon. That is all it is. Let's look at step 2. Step 2 asks us, it says write the element name with added IDE suffix to the second element in the compound. So now we're talking about the hydrogen. We need to give it its IDE ending. This is the exact same process as when we were naming ionic bonds. We're giving it an IDE. So hydrogen turns into hydride. I'm going to move these down a little bit, more centered in the screen. Carbon hydride. We want to look towards step 3 now. Step 3 says add the appropriate prefix to each element in the compound. The prefixes are going to associate themselves with the number of atoms. So the prefix is going to tell us how many carbons are there or how many hydrogens. Here is a table that I made to go through all those prefixes. We're going to focus on 10 prefixes, 1 through 10, and they're listed here on the right. It's something that you will have to memorize and know. So when I look at this, I'm going to do step 3. I'm going to add the appropriate prefixes. There are 2 carbons, so I'm going to need the prefix di to indicate that there are 2. So I have dicarbon. And then there are 2 hydrogens, or 2 hydrides. So I'm going to need the prefix di again to indicate that there are 2 hydrides. Now, the name of this molecule is dicarbon dihydride. And we use 3 steps to make it happen. Let's look at another example just like that. The next example we're going to look at is going to utilize some more atoms. So we're going to look at Si7F9. Well, we look at step 1 and we have to write the very first thing in its normal element name. We would read it off the periodic table, and that is silicon. We do nothing to it, we just write the word silicon. We follow that up by writing the element name of the second element, but we give it its IDE ending. So here we have fluorine. This is going to turn into fluoride. So now I have silicon and fluoride. I look at step 3 and it says add the appropriate prefixes. So we're going to have to look at our chart, look at our subscripts in our actual formula to tell us what prefixes we're going to use. Silicon, there are 7 of them, so we're going to need the prefix hepta. And then there are 9 fluorines, which means we're going to need the prefix nana. So now I have the complete name, heptasilicon nonfluoride, using these prefixes in these first 3 steps. Well, we got to add another step to this, SBr4. And the reason this is a little different because we add a new rule to this. So we're going to add step 4. And step 4 tells us, do not add mono to the first element name. So let's look at this. We go with step 1, we have sulfur. On the left, our first element, it is named normally sulfur. I have bromine on the right, but I use the IDE ending. I get bromide. Now I want to go through and I want to do the prefixes. So I know if there's only 1 sulfur, that would lead me to believe it would be a mono prefix, But as step 4 just indicated, with the first element, for some reason, we do not give it a prefix. So instead of saying monosulfur, we just keep it as sulfur. However, we still want to give a prefix to the bromide, and there are 4 of them, so we will use the prefix tetra. Here we have sulfur, tetrabromide, and because there was only one sulfur atom, we aren't going to give it a prefix. The first atom does not get a prefix when there's only one of them. However, the second will, and we're going to see an example at the very end. So I want to introduce the 5th and final rule. And this is just a small rule, but it kind of helps with the flow and pronouncing some of these compounds. So I want to look at Cl2O. Cl2O. I look at step 1, I do follow the same steps. I know it's a chlorine. I know it's an oxide. That's step 1 and 2. Now when I go to do my prefixes, I want to look at chlorine. If there's only one of them, I cannot use the prefix mono. If there's any more than one, I can use any of these prefixes. There happens to be 2, so I will use the prefix dichlorine. And when I look at oxide, there's only one of them, so I've used the prefix mono. So now I have monooxide. Kind of a lot of syllables, isn't it? So the step 5 rule is that if you're adding prefix, create the following vowel pattern of AO or OO, turn that pronunciation into just an O. So what we have is we have 2 O's, monooxide. And we want to get rid of that kind of clumsiness. We want to replace it with monoxide. So I got rid of one of the O's. I slashed an O out. I made it easier to pronounce, monoxide. So now I have dichlorine monoxide. We're going to do one more example. It is the full-scale example of everything that we need to be able to do, all 5 steps into one example. CO. Step 1, I have my first element in its typical element name, that is carbon. Step 2 is I have the oxide, the IDE version of the second element. So I have carbon oxide. I want to add my prefixes in step 3. I look at carbon, there's only one of them, and that has to put off a red flag saying, ooh, do not use the prefix mono. It gets nothing. I then look through and I see oxygen, or oxide, there's only one of them. I do want to use the prefix mono. So I've done step 1, 2, 3, 4, and now I'm looking at this double O. I realize that this double O vowel pattern needs to be changed. I need to replace the O, get rid of and slash out this O right here, goodbye, and I want to replace it with a simple monoxide. So there's carbon monoxide. There's the 5 steps to naming covalent compounds. Work on the practice sheet that I'll give you. I will post a picture of this chart so you guys have it, as well as all 5 of these steps. Good luck. We're done with covalent bonding. We're going to move into types of reactions next.